Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Hare Krishna. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, first canto, chapter 19, verse 18. We are continuing with the description of Parikshit Maharaj's surrender. I'm going to read the verse. You don't have to repeat now. Evam cha tasmin naradeva deve prayapavishte divideva sangha prashasya bhumao vyakiran prasunayr muda muhur dundubhyascha nedu. Thank you. Translation. This is the Hungarian. Translation. Thus, the King Maharaj Parikshit set to fast until death. All the demigods of the higher planets praised the king's actions and in pleasure continuously scattered flowers over the earth and beat celestial drums. Purport. Even up to the time of Maharaj Parikshit, there were interplanetary communications, and the news of Maharaj Parikshit's fasting unto death to attain salvation reached the higher planets in the sky where the intelligent demigods live. The demigods are more luxurious than human beings, but all of them are obedient to the orders of the Supreme Lord. There is no one in the heavenly planets who is an atheist or non-believer. Thus, any devotee of the Lord on the surface of the earth is always praised by them. And in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, they were greatly delighted and thus gave tokens of honor by scattering flowers over the earth by beating celestial drums. A demigod takes pleasure in seeing someone go back to Godhead. He is always pleased with the devotee of the Lord, so much so that by the Adidhaivik powers he may help the devotee in all respect, and by their actions the Lord is pleased with them. There is an invisible chain of complete cooperation between the Lord, the demigods, and the devotee of the Lord on earth. Evam cha tasmin naradeva deve prayopavishte divideva sangha prashasya bhumau vyakiran prasunayr muda muhur dhundubhyascha nedu. Thus the King Maharaj Parikshit sat to fast until death. All the demigods of the higher planets praised the king's actions and in pleasure continuously scattered flowers over the earth and beat celestial drums. Om Jnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaiṣṇavebhyo Namo Namaha. Egy, 19, 18. I'm going to go a little bit off tangent here for a few minutes, with your permission. Earlier, I compared Maharaj Parikshit's arriving at this stage in his life to our own surrender and arriving into the temple, etc. So we are now here, but how did we arrive here? And this is what I would like to talk a little bit about and emphasize. In the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, in the 11th canto, 9th chapter, it is stated, Shrištva Purani Vividhyan Ajatma Shaktya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, expanding his own potency, Maya Shakti, created innumerable species of life to house the conditioned souls. Yet, by creating the forms of trees, reptiles, animals, birds, snakes, and so on, the Lord was not satisfied within his heart. Then he created human life, which offers the conditioned soul sufficient intelligence to perceive the absolute truth, and became pleased. So this verse starts off a chain reaction. So we are conditioned souls, we are spirit souls who are, as in this verse it is stated, housed. We are housed. This is our house now. So it is by the mercy of Krishna, basically. That's what this verse says, that we have this human body, because only in the human body we can start our journey back home. Then Kapila Dev explains, living entities, this is 3:29-28, living entities are superior to inanimate objects, O Blessed Mother, and among them, living entities who display life symptoms are better. Animals with developed consciousness are better than them, and better still are those who have developed sense perception. So this is the hierarchy. We are now talking about the body. There is a parallel which might not necessarily go side by side, but there is also a parallel in consciousness, in the growth of our consciousness. But now we are talking about the body, physical body. In the next verse, Kapila Deva explains, among the living entities who have developed sense perception, those who have developed the sense of taste are better than those who have developed only sense of touch. Better than them are those who develop the sense of smell, and better still are those who have developed the sense of hearing. So we know that in this universe there is 8,400,000 living entities. We all know that, yes? Entities, very important. Amongst those, the Bhagavatam states there are 900,000 aquatic species, plants and trees, 2 million, insects and reptiles, 1,100,000, birds, 1 million. It's quite a big number of birds. Can you imagine how many you can name? There's like, I don't even know how there is 1 million, but where are they? Where are they hiding? And quadrupeds, or animals, are 3 million. And human beings, 400,000. Only small. So we are the smaller. We are in the minority. We are representing the smallest group here. So going back to these two verses by Kapila Dev, there is this hierarchy: inanimate objects, things which don't have soul, which don't house a spirit soul, are like just inanimate objects. They are the lowest. If you break your chair, you will not go to the jail, frankly saying. Or you won't even... You will get a reaction, but you will not get karma. That is the rule with this. Then we have living entities, which literally means anything which houses a soul is a living entity. And now we get to the stage of with life symptoms. It says it's a very nice, they're called sthavara, living entities with life symptoms. They can be actually stones, minerals. Did you know that? Also there is hills and mountains can also house a soul. Trees, plants. They are living entities, but with very extremely covered consciousness. They are very much covered in tamas, but they are living entities. So that's why sometimes when people mine in the mountains or bomb mountains to mine, it's not right. You know, they shake, and they also have these, I wouldn't say senses, but they also feel. And then they, you know, shake, and then things collapse. I once heard that mountains also move. I don't know how that works, but I also heard that. Then we arrived to the living entities with life symptoms. These are living entities with very basic sense perception, a feeling, a feel of touch. Anything touches them, they feel it. But they don't hear, they don't see, they don't smell. So these could be insects, reptiles, worms. This is just like such as, not all of them. I'm not listing each and every species. So I just want to go through this because this is just a vehicle for me to arrive at an important point on our class. So we won't dwell on these details. So living entities with developed consciousness are the next. This is only certain animals. Not every animal has a developed consciousness. For instance, a sponge is considered an animal, but its level of consciousness is very low. So, and then we have living entities with developed sense perception. Now we arrive at senses, how they interact with the surrounding through their senses. And these are quadrupeds, horses, cows, anything which has 4 legs, dogs, and humans. Humans are in this category. Among the living entities with sense perception is another hierarchy, that's the second verse. Those who have sense of touch, it says trees, plants, grass, creepers, algae. Sense of taste, now this is interesting. If you studied the creation in the Bhagavatam, you know that the taste comes with water. When the water element appears, that's when the taste comes. So aquatics, they possess sense of taste. Insects, worms, leeches, mollusks, these have sense of taste. Smell, insects, hills, reptiles, and the lower quadrupeds like dogs, wolves, things like that. And the hearing, and this is an interesting jump here. Hearing is animals such as horses, elephants, certain birds, basically animals which can be trained by sound. You can whistle and the bird will come here. Or you can, I don't know, what do you do with the elephant? And he will do this. They hear and then they can be trained. And humans. So, this was, so to speak, an evolution, our journey. But this is also heavily influenced by our consciousness. So how we utilize these bodies. But the point here is that a human body is very rare. So out of 8,400,000, there is only a small window for a human body. And even out of 400,000, there is only a very small percentage, which is what we would call human. Human body is not equal, or it doesn't necessarily mean human species. Human species are those who follow Dharma. So that's basically the bottom line. So it's very rare. I found a nice verse, Viveka Chudhamani, verse 2. It's by Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya. I won't read the Sanskrit, but it says, for all living beings, a human birth is difficult to obtain. More so is a male body. Rarer than that is Brahminhood, to become a Brahmin. And rarer still is attachment to the path of Vedic Dharma. So that's kind of bottom line. It's very, very important to understand that it's not something given. It's not something we just kind of can waste. Okay. So that was our, what I here called like the beginning, and now we arrived at the present. Bhagavad Gita 7.3, who knows it? Manushyanam Kaschid Yatata Kaschin Maveti Tatvata. Out of many thousands among men, so we are now humans, and there are many, many, many men, many humans. Prabhupada says here men, but it doesn't mean male body. It's just the Vedic way to express a species, a human species. Some devotees complained that Prabhupada was chauvinist and he was always man, where are the women? It's not about that. So you must understand this. So out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and out of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. And then Chaitanya Charitamrita 19.151, Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade by Bhaktilata Bij. So how do we get, how do we get to that 1%, let's say here, hardly knows me in truth? By the mercy of Guru and Krishna. So from being a mollusk somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, now we are sitting in this room listening to a Bhagavatam class. So what it really means, bottom line, is that you are very, 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 very precious. What you achieved, where you arrived, is what we would call the pinnacle, like the top of the existence in this material universe. Do you think like that as well? You think like that? Very good. 1 out of 10 or 5. So we are here, we arrived, and then when we joined, we weren't glorified by the demigods like Parikshit Maharaj. We weren't showered with flowers, but it is equally important that now we have this human body, this form with which we can carry on our journey back home, back to Godhead. What is the most important aspect of what capability we as humans have, as opposed to the list we just went through? It's what we would call the intelligence. We don't see like flock of geese going to the temple and church somewhere, or bees flying here and sitting nicely in the pews, I don't know how you pronounce it, and then listening to the sermon. But we do see that with humans. So we can utilize our intelligence to ascertain the transcendental knowledge and apply it to ourselves. That makes sense so far? Parikshit Maharaj, when he went to the Ganges and sat down, the most important achievement there wasn't that he fasted, that he gave up his kingdom, that he, I don't know what else he did. Well, that's basically it. He gave up his kingdom and sat down fasting. That wasn't the big deal. The big deal is coming in the future verses is the arrival of his spiritual master and him listening to the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And this is only possible in the association of devotees. So, you here now, on the top of your game, you achieved something. So the most important aspect of your stay here in the association of devotees is the association of devotees. Nothing else. It's not, we can go into details, it's not how you wear the dhoti, it's not how you put the sari on, it's not how less or not you eat, or how, whatever. It really doesn't matter. Those are all very minute details. The most important aspect is the association of the devotees. Because in the human life form, we hear the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And then, because we hear it, we then repeat it. Shravanam Kirtanam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. If I am amongst the devotees, there is a 99.99% chance that I will hear the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. As a matter of fact, it should be 100%. That's how you define a devotee. You know, one who always remembers Krishna and talks about Krishna. So, do you also think like this? That this is very important, that we live amongst devotees? Sometimes we get confused and we think that an important association. I went on Sankirtan today and I met a celebrity. I took a selfie. You know, here it is. I met this actor. Or I met a politician, you know, I shook hand with a politician, you know, everyone knows him. So now I was in his association. Or who else is demigods? They are like, you know, I mean, maybe you met a demigod, maybe you will, maybe you have, I don't know, but you would certainly think it's very special, it's something very extraordinary, no? Like Arjuna when he went up to the Svarga and what is her name? Sachi, I think. Urvasi, but Indra's wife. She also approached him and he said, no, you are my mother, you know. You're my father's wife. You are like my mother. But it doesn't work like that. No, Arjuna said, no. It works for me like that. So basically that's... so he wasn't overwhelmed with such association. So we shouldn't be either. We should consider these people around us the most important people in our lives now. Maybe in future you will move out, you will live in a city, and you will work, and you will have a family, etc. Or whatever happens to you, you will remember this period of your life with a relish, because it gave you, you know, the basis of your future spiritual life. It gave you the fundamentals. I remember when we were brahmacharis in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, 2000s, we were fanatics. And that's how you should be. You have youth, why not? So we didn't flinch. We just did everything by the book and we pushed it. And then I remember back then, traveling sannyasis, Srila Prabhupada disciples were telling us, when we were young and Prabhupada was here, we were fanatics, we didn't flinch, we did everything by the book. So for them, we were like, for us, we were like, oh. And then devotees from Scotland who were already 10, 12 years older than us in spiritual life were coming to Hungary to teach us book distribution. For us, they were like demigods, like, wow. If someone was like 2 years older, he was already considered, in spiritual life 2 years older. It's considered like a very, very senior devotee. And then we took every chance to serve those devotees, to hear from those devotees. And now, in our current state, current life, we have this opportunity and fortune that we can practice spiritual life on all the scale, on the entire scale. We can associate with younger devotees appropriately. We can be very, what is the word, compassionate towards them, the younger devotees. We can practice compassion. Do you do that? Who are younger devotees compared to you? Who do you consider younger devotee?
I'm the youngest.
You are the youngest. Everyone considers him the youngest. Compassion. He is the youngest. But let's say those devotees who we meet on the street and then invite them to the temple. Just come for the Sunday program. Or there are in the Dirakutir, they're regularly, preaching to young students, and they invite them for these monk weekends. That's very good. So we have to be compassionate to them. We have to think about this list here, that they arrived to a certain point through, and we didn't even touch the time aspect here. This was like gazillions of years, millions and millions of lifetimes until we achieve this human body form. It's very rare, very rare. And they are now in the temple, they hear. I was just during Kirtan, very lovely Kirtan, thank you very much. Wasn't it a lovely Kirtan? Very enthusiastic, very, very nice. I was just watching these workers, they are renovating the garden in the church across the road, and they were looking at us, curious, and they were talking. So what does it mean? Next life, they are going. They are arriving. They might just be moving into the temple here or somewhere. So this as well. Oh, and definitely then. Definitely human body and devotion. So they are accumulating this bhakti sukriti, this fortune, which then opens up, the path to devotional life. It's, very, very fortunate. This makes sense, this kind of how I try to explain this. 3.25.25, Kapila Dev explains to his mother. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 3.25.25, Satam prashangamam mavirya samvido. Some of you know the verse, very important verse. Bhavanti krit karna rasayana kata tajoshanad ashvapavargavatmani shradharatir bhaktir anukramishyati. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. This is a tricky verse. It kind of builds up nicely, but then it says, the real devotion begins. But it starts with this, association of devotees. I have one more verse which I want to read, and then we will conclude. It's Prahlad Maharaj says this, 7th canto, 5th chapter, 32. Unless they smear upon their bodies the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaiṣṇava, completely free from material contamination, persons very much inclined towards materialistic life cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, who is glorified for his uncommon activities. Only by becoming Krishna conscious and taking shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, in this way can one be freed from material contamination. So this is a nice conclusion, I think. Did you smear the dust of your roommate on your head this morning? Did you went to him and took the dust of his slippers and put it on your head? Do that, please. It helps. It might sound very kind of cheesy or insincere, but no. If you believe this is the only way to develop your faith and your devotion, then here we go. How many feet we have here, just in this room? We are in abundance of the cure for our contamination. So be sincere in this, understand the true meaning behind it, and then do it. Sometimes it will be easy in your devotional life, sometimes it will be very hard. But always remember, the only way forward is by the mercy of devotees. There is no other way. Because wherever you end up in your life from now on, only the devotees will remind you of Krishna, no one else. No matter who they are, where they are, what they achieved, how big they think they are, whatever. If they don't remind you of Krishna, you are lost. Okay. Any, I don't know how to say, question in French?
Question.
Question. Any question?
Prabhu, so in the beginning you were talking about the mountains housing a living entity. Is that applying to all the mountains or just certain mountains? And what about volcano? Is it, of course, it's no doubt they're living.
We just skimmed through this. It's not the most important aspect of today's class, but now that you asked, now that you asked, not every mountain is a living entity, and I never heard that volcanoes are living entities. You heard something? The hell with that? It's the earth itself is a living entity. It's represented by Mother Bhumi, but in this context, what we were talking about, yeah, not every mountain is living entity.
And also, I was wondering, 400,000 species of life.
Human,
yeah. I was always, what is the definition of species? Is it like, any human who can reproduce themselves is considered one species? Or, it's like if you're from another continent, a different body feature, you're considered a second species? Or how does that work?
This is defined by the consciousness, the level of your consciousness. And that will, someone else, I would encourage maybe Dina Vatsala to prepare and explain the levels of consciousness. Anamaya, Manamaya, Pranamaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. So these are the levels of consciousness. And depending on whichever form you are, and this basically applies to humans, and then where you situate yourself, all these levels of consciousness, they have characteristics, they have signs. Like, the very basic one, Anamaya, is like you perceive the world around you through your mouth, through your sense of taste. And who, in this context, human life, who are those who perceive the life through putting everything in the mouth? Who? Babies, little children. They crawl, they see something, oh, what is this? So that's how they perceive the world. So that's a very low level of consciousness. So that means there is still a lot to progress. So that's defined by the level of consciousness.
So in one lifetime, you can change your consciousness.
Yeah.
And there's one also something that before I became a devotee, I heard about.
Oh, you said you are the lowest, so you already became a devotee. Ah.
That
I'm
before
joking.
I
I'm joking. Carry on.
there was a podcast. It was about Buddhism. They were talking about attaining a human form of life, and then the speaker was giving the example. It is like having a human form of life. It's like winning the lottery 7 times in a row. I thought it was a nice example.
Indeed.
And also back in the time of Prabhupada, I heard that they were devotees. They were waking up in the morning and they were touching the feet of each other.
Yes.
Especially Vishuddhan Swami Maharaj and
Yes.
Subha.
What we did basically is that when we woke up in the morning, we bowed down, chanted our pranams, and then we offered obeisances to each other, Vanchakalpa. And then when we came into the temple room, I see many devotees doing, but it's not, what is the word? It's not that emphasized, it's not so out, but I see some devotees are doing. When you come to the association or assembly of the devotees, you offer your obeisances. So you water Tulsi, you offer obeisances Tulsi, and then you turn to the most senior devotee and you offer your dandavats to them. And then other devotees also bow. So, yeah, it's a very nice practice because it establishes that understanding of respect towards. And then we can argue that, oh, but he is like snoring, or he is like this, and his socks smell, and she's always talking, blah, blah, blah. So is she really a devotee? Is he? So you have to put that aside. You have to actually forget about that, because as soon as you leave this premise, you will then realize what a value lives here, what is the actual value of even a smelly devotee. That makes sense? Yeah. Love it?
So, um, you spoke about, you advised us that we should take the dust of the devotees' around us and smear it on our body. And yeah, can you just speak a little bit about sincerity? Whether you instructed us now, maybe some of us will do this every day, or mechanically, or how we can cultivate really this feeling of, okay, I need this, I need to do this 12 times, and really understand this, the principle.
We came with an agenda, Iterva. We came with an agenda, we arrived here, we moved in, or some of you actually traveled from abroad to come here. But let's say we became devotees from whatever background we did that. And it's as we today talked, it's a very, it's the highest achievement in the entire universe. No Olympic medal, no number of lotteries, nothing compares to this. And then we all arrived here, and now then real devotion and devotional service begin. So now we need to do everything according to the book. That will purify our heart from the anarthas, from the contamination, and that will firm or establish our knowledge why this is important, how this is happening. Along the way of you doing this, your devotional service, you study and you do your sadhana. Basically, this is what I just said. Along the way, anything which helps, you take it. Anything which helps. Like runners on the marathon, they grab a glass of water and drink it. Anything which helps. Some take off the shoes because it's just obstacle. Anything what helps, you take it. And it's not me who says this, it's Prahlad Maharaj who says it. Dust of the lotus feet of a pure devotee helps. Whether you are sincere about it or not, it helps. Whether you understand it or not, it helps. How this works, it's very interesting. The association of a pure devotee, some think, oh, I have to hear, and then it will affect. Yes, you have to hear from a pure devotee, but the mere presence, physical presence of a pure devotee helps. Shivara Maharaj said this, that when they were bidding farewell to Srila Prabhupada, they were sitting in the airport, and he was just sitting next to Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj didn't say anything, that they didn't speak, but he felt Prabhupada's mercy. So equally, if we think this way, you are a pure devotee, you are a pure devotee, you are a pure devotee, just by being next to you, I'm advancing. Let alone if you say something about Krishna or remind me of Krishna, or if I manage to take the dust of your lotus feet and put it on my head. Ez így jó? Nem jó? No? Nem jó? Nem jó? So. Okay, just on time. Prabhu?
So what is so devotee, like Srila Prabhupada, for example, he had a mission. So in a analogical way, we could say we have a mission that our guru or service that we were given to us, yeah. So Prabhupada, he actually is Prabhupada, but he went all alone to give his mission. So just with respect to what you said today, devotee, like what's the priority for a devotee? Because you said all crucial is association. But in Prabhupada's case, for example, of course it's different case, but
Yes.
But the service was superior to the You understand my question?
Yes, I hope so. During this year's Vyasa Puja of my spiritual master, he gave an address and he thanked all the devotees for their praise and their offerings. And then he emphasized that most of all, we should be very grateful to what Srila Prabhupada gave us. And then what Srila Prabhupada gave us is three things. Govinda Maharaj said, Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj. He said, he gave us the holy name, he gave us the transcendental knowledge, and the most important thing, the association of devotees. So, one can work without the other to some degree, but nothing will work without the association of devotees. What you should focus on, you, is what really matters for you right now in your spiritual life. If you received an instruction from your spiritual master that you come here, may I inquire who is your spiritual master? Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. When I once asked a senior devotee what is the most important thing we should understand in regards of the spiritual master, he told me two things. What is the mood of the guru and what is the mission of the guru? If you understand this, then wherever you will never be separate from your spiritual master. So you can meditate on this in your life, and then details will come up, and then you will have to focus on those. Maybe now you are adjusting to a new service, so it takes up your intellectual capacity, and you need to focus and figure that out. But once you settle into this new service, then you will have to be careful. The ego will start coming up, and you will feel kind of, overconfident in your new. So you have to focus on that to keep that in check. So it's a very natural process. Nothing has to be forced or artificially, brought about. That's not how it works. Focus on chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, serving the devotees, doing your seva, and then it works out. As it you? This is good? Très bien. Yo. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantara Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Jai Nitai Go Premananda.